Benjamin Franklin held the position of Postmaster General of the United Colonies from July 26, 1775 until November 7, 1776, a little over 15 months. Though his tenure as Postmaster General under the Continental Congress was relatively brief, his impact on the postal system was profound. His successor, Richard Back, continued to lead the system during the Revolutionary War. In late 1776, just as British forces were occupying New York and threatening Philadelphia, Back had to keep mail flowing despite a full-scale war, which disrupted mail routes, lost postal operations due to British occupation of captured cities, and delivery riders who were targeted and conscripted. The system had to adapt constantly, rerouting around battle zones and rebuilding destroyed infrastructure. As the fledgling United States began formalizing its communication systems, from a wartime necessity, the postal system evolved into a national institution, essential for unifying a geographically sprawling republic. After the war, the postal system continued to operate under the Articles of Confederation, but it was underfunded, disorganized, and lacked strong federal oversight. Communication between states was poor, routes were inconsistent, and postmasters often operated independently. There was no formal department of the post office yet, just a loosely centralized service managed by Congress. Ebenezer Hazard was appointed Postmaster General of the United States in January 1782 by the Continental Congress during the final years of the Revolutionary War. Hazard was a surveyor of the post roads from 1775 to 1776. This gave him deep knowledge of mail routes, logistics, and infrastructure. 1789, U.S. Constitution ratified Article 1, Section 8. Clause 7 gives Congress the power to establish post offices and post roads. When the U.S. Constitution was ratified, a new federal government formed. President George Washington did not retain him. Instead, he appointed Samuel Osgood as the first Postmaster General under the Constitution. Postal Act of 1792 established the U.S. Post Office Department under the federal government, protected mail privacy, encouraged the dissemination of newspapers at reduced rates. The act was one of the most important pieces of early American legislation. It transformed the Postal Service from a wartime tool into a permanent national institution. A stronger post was much needed to support commerce across growing interstate markets, deliver legal documents, contracts, and financial records, encourage settlement of the western frontier by connecting new territories to the east. Reliable communication would bind the states into a cohesive economic system. The rise of political factions, Federalists versus Democratic Republicans, made newspapers a political weapon. Congress had to decide whether the Post would subsidize political publications and to promote press access to all Americans, not just elites. Congress, however, did choose to subsidize newspapers and political publications through low postage rates, making it cheap, or in some cases nearly free, to circulate the press across the United States. By the early 1800s, newspapers accounted for 70 to 90% of the mail volume, most of it delivered at a loss. Postal Act of 1801 and subsequent legislation gave the Postmaster General explicit authority to appoint agents to investigate postal fraud, enforce mail laws, and audit postmasters. Though not officially titled Postal Inspector, William Goddard, a printer, patriot, and close ally of Franklin, acted in this capacity. He is widely credited as the first de facto postal inspector in the American colonies. By the 1830s, these agents were officially referred to as special agents and later as postal inspectors. It remains one of the few agencies empowered to operate across state lines without needing local jurisdiction. By the 1830s, 1840s, the volume of mail, especially newspapers, exploded, but revenue did not scale with costs. Mail handling remained labor-intensive. Each item had to be weighed, rated by distance, paid for by the recipient, not the sender. This system was confusing, easily evaded, costly to manage, and revenue collection was inconsistent, causing postmasters to spend much of their time tracking unpaid postage. Between 1833 and 1836, the Andrew Jackson administration appointed Abraham Lincoln as postmaster of New Salem. Lincoln was known for personally delivering mail to residents and honest record keeping. It is said that during his time in office, Lincoln's reputation for honesty in his works fed into him earning the nickname Honest Abe. In 1840, Britain introduced the world's first postage adhesive postage stamp, the penny black, produced by Sir Rowland Hill. It revolutionized mail service by standardizing rates, requiring prepayment by the sender, and streamlined postal operations. Postmaster General Cave Johnson, who served from 1845 to 1849, oversaw the issuing of the first U.S. postage stamps featuring Benjamin Franklin and George Washington. The 5-cent Benjamin Franklin was for distances under 300 miles, while the 10-cent George Washington was for distances over 300 miles. Westward expansion and manifest destiny. As the U.S. expanded west and southwest, especially after the Mexican-American War and the California Gold Rush, the post office rapidly built out. Overland mail routes extended to California and Oregon, creating new post offices in frontier towns, which required mail contracts with private carriers where infrastructure was lacking. The Mail Act of 1857. In March 1857, Congress passed an act to provide for the conveyance of the mails from the Atlantic to the Pacific states. It authorized the Postmaster General to establish a semi-weekly mail service between St. Louis and San Francisco. The route was to be no more than 2,800 miles, have mail delivered in 25 days or less. Butterfield's proposal. Butterfield offered a southern route via St. Louis, Fort Smith, El Paso, Tucson, and Los Angeles, year-round operation, avoiding snowy northern passes, a detailed plan for stations every 20 miles, with water, food, fresh horses, and security, personnel, equipment, and logistics already in place thanks to his existing transportation empire. Aaron V. Brown, Postmaster General under President James Buchanan, awarded the contract to John Butterfield and Associates in September 1857. The contract, paid $600,000 per year, was valid for 6 years, required Butterfield to begin service within a year. Butterfield formed the Overland Mail Company to fulfill the contract, recruiting partners from other express companies and raising capital. The first stagecoach left Tipton, Missouri, on September 16, 1858, and arrived in San Francisco on October 10th. The company ran semi-weekly service, with stages traveling day and night, over 2,800 miles in under 25 days. In the late 1850s, it was taking 20 to 30 days for mail to travel between the East and West Coast, via steamship and Panama route and via Butterfield's Overland Mail.